We destroyed the nuclear. In other words, it's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come.
That was President Trump today, speaking on stage at the NATO summit in the Netherlands, reiterating his proclamation that Iran's nuclear program has been obliterated. But it comes amid conflicting reports about the efficacy of U.S. strikes on Iran. An assessment out today from Israeli intelligence says Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons has been set back, quote unquote, many years. But a U.S. intel report leaked to several media outlets yesterday said the attacks did not collapse underground buildings at Iranian nuclear facilities and therefore only set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months. Joining us to discuss, Nile Sainage, White House columnist here at The Hill. Nile, it's hard to know what exactly to believe here, but it seems like the celebration that the world has been liberated from fear of Iran's nuclear program is a bit premature.
Certainly is premature if this preliminary finding from the Defense Intelligence Agency is to be believed. The suggestion there is that the progress of Iran toward enriching uranium and perhaps eventually obtaining a nuclear weapon has only been put back by about 6 months. So if you put that finding in juxtaposition with the political risk that President Trump has chosen to take by virtue of sending US warplanes to bomb Iran, well, that's a pretty small reward for a pretty large risk. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as you say, there is a much less celebratory attitude even among the administration today.
There is this classified briefing with members of the U.S. Senate set for tomorrow to talk about these attacks. The House is scheduled to get a briefing on Friday. These meetings were supposed to happen Tuesday, but they were postponed. You know, it's one thing for Trump to spin this in the media and make it seem like his administration's actions were a resounding success, but I imagine lawmakers from both parties are going to want to know the truth about the state of Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah, no question about that whatsoever. We've already seen Democrats be pretty vocal about their objections to these briefings being postponed. It's really rather clear that Democrats see that postponement as kind of suspicious, as a suggestion that the Trump administration is either not being fully forthcoming, doesn't wish to be, or alternatively, doesn't wish to fess up to this finding from the DIA, suggesting that there was much less damage done than President Trump suggested. Remember, President Trump was originally using the term obliterated. That was not the kind of finding that we saw in this report that was leaked to the media.
I think it'll also be interesting to see what Israel says about the situation. Ultimately, its security is most at risk if Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons. It's also been politically advantageous for Prime Minister Netanyahu, who positions himself as the one who can protect Israel from Iran. Would Netanyahu toe the line that the threat is eliminated, even if that's unclear?
It's very possible that he would. He certainly would have a political motivation to do so. And I think that gets at the broader question here, Drew, because one of the reasons the US report has received so much attention is because its findings seem to go against what it's, not even biased, but what it would want to achieve is different from what it has found was achieved. That's not the case for either President Trump personally or Prime Minister Netanyahu personally. Both of them have a political interest in saying the maximal amount of damage was inflicted. But if the US intelligence reporting is different from that, then it almost gains credibility because it is not aligned with the outcome that the US intelligence community presumably wanted.
But if Iran's nuclear program has in fact not been eliminated the way Trump describes, and Israelis still face a prolonged threat, at least in the long term, from Iran's nuclear program, doesn't Netanyahu run some risk of not leveling with the Israeli people on that?
Yeah, I mean, in that scenario, he would do. Let's say in that hypothetical, Netanyahu continues to insist that the Israeli program has been destroyed, and 9 months or a year from now, the Iranians say that no, it hasn't been, and they have got uranium enriched again or making progress toward a bomb. That would obviously be a big problem for Netanyahu. I think I misspoke a moment ago and said Israelis when I meant to say Iranians. The point is that if the Iranians do indeed make progress that Netanyahu claimed had been destroyed, not merely disrupted, that is potentially a political problem for him.
What do you make of Trump's attacks on the media here? He was up on stage at that NATO summit calling the American press terrible people with no credibility. They are reporting on an assessment of the U.S. strikes done by the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is part of Trump's Department of Defense. The Trump administration isn't questioning the authenticity of that document. In fact, they're promising to launch an investigation to figure out who leaked it. Trump says the press is attacking the pilots by reporting on this, but that just doesn't really make any sense.
Not really. I think that the distinction you draw in your question is an important one, Drew. The administration is not saying that the media reporting is false in the sense that they're not disputing this assessment from the DIA exists and said essentially what the media have reported it says. So Trump and others in his administration are making a different argument, either casting the press as in some fashion unpatriotic or anti-Trump. Of course, that's a song the president sings all the time, but it doesn't get around what for him is a fairly appreciable problem, which is this intelligence assessment from within his own administration that is at odds with what he has said publicly.
I just don't know what the press is supposed to do here. They acquire this classified intelligence and then they're supposed to, I don't know, not report it. That would be what Trump wants.
Right, and I mean it is plainly in the public interest to know what the press has reported in this instance. So I'm not sure what the imperative would be for the press to conceal valid information that they have obtained.
All right, lots will continue to follow, but for now we'll leave it at that. Nile Stanage, White House columnist here at The Hill. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.